This is Selection Sunday. It's finally here. Welcome to IU Sports Sunday. I'm Nick Rodecap with you. It's the greatest day, one of the greatest days of the year in college sports. It is Selection Sunday, and I am excited also because it's spring break, so that's pretty cool too. But what's cooler is that we will find out in just a few hours what the field of 68 will look like for this year's NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament. And for Indiana men's basketball, well, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this because it's pretty old news by now, but it could literally go either way. Indiana bowed out of the Big Ten tournament, unceremoniously faced Oregon, and really just didn't even show up in the second half. I'll be honest, I was in class during that game, so I could not watch it. We were actually taping a newscast, and there was no way for me to watch that while I was on set because I couldn't. Whatever. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I could not watch the game. I was glancing at it in passing, but suffice it to say, it was not good. Not good for Indiana men's basketball. You thought maybe with the momentum they had going into the conference tournament that they would have a chance to make a run, which I know I might sound delusional for saying, but the way they were playing near the end of the season, it felt like Indiana had a chance maybe to lock up a spot in the NCAA tournament with a win over Oregon, but did not get it done. Did not even come close to getting it done. Losing by 13. That was a game where Oregon just kind of kept Indiana at arm's length the entire time. And never really, the game was close, right? But Indiana never really had a chance, especially in the second half. In the second half, I do remember, again, I was in class during this. I didn't get a chance to watch it fully, which is not cool. But I do remember that Indiana went very cold in the second half. Just not good. And for the Hoosiers, you might think, okay, well, if they just could have beaten Oregon, they could be in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. But Indiana had plenty of opportunities before the Big Ten tournament to lock up a spot in the Big Dance. You think of all the close losses that they had, most of which I called for IU Student Radio, which was really funny. Every single game it felt like that I called after the turn of the calendar to 2025 was either not even the turn of the calendar, but every Big Ten game that I called was either a blowout loss or a loss which could just as easily have been a win. So I'll run it through for you. The games that I broadcasted for IU Student Radio this season for WIUX. So I went to Nebraska back in December. That was a 17-point loss in a game that was tied with 6.5 minutes left. I called the Iowa game, drove out to Iowa City to broadcast as Indiana lost by 25. So we've got margins of an average of 20 points through the first two Big Ten games that I called. And then we'll take a look after the Iowa game. I broadcasted Indiana's 1-point loss to Maryland, where Rodney Rice hit an impossible shot. Again, Indiana could just as easily have won that game. I broadcasted the Michigan game, where Indiana lost by 3. I broadcasted the UCLA game, where Indiana lost by 4. And then I broadcasted the Oregon game, which was tied with a minute left, before Jackson Shelstad hit an impossible desperation heave with a hand in his face. So I guess if you're an Indiana fan, the good news is I'm not broadcasting any more Indiana men's basketball this year. So if they do make the NCAA tournament, then they will not lose because of me. And that, I think, is an accomplishment, if nothing else, for my own sake, because it's like in all those close losses, I was watching the same game unfold over and over and over. It felt like Groundhog Day. I couldn't escape it. There's a phrase that I like to use, and many other people like to use as well, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. That's what it felt like Indiana men's basketball did over and over and over again throughout the Big Ten season, especially after about mid-January. I forgot to mention the Northwestern game, the Purdue game in West Lafayette. just taking a look down the list, those are the ones that stick out, right? But it's tough. It's tough, and you hear the players trying to make the sales pitch to the selection committee that, oh, well, we're playing good enough right now. We're playing well enough right now to where we deserve a bid. And I would say no. No, you don't deserve a bid. You maybe deserve a first 4 spot where you'll play Xavier or, I don't know, Boise State or North Carolina. It's such a toss-up right now, I think. I don't know that Xavier's going to be in. Joe Lunardi has Indiana in the first 4, which selfishly I would like because they would play Xavier and I would get to go see my friends in Dayton. But I don't really know that that's going to happen. It's such a toss-up. Indiana, after last night, is the last team in. So it is entirely up to the selection committee whether or not the Hoosiers get into the big dance tonight. But I don't know. Like, what if you're an Indiana fan? Let's be honest. With the way this team is so streaky and inconsistent, I don't even really. I'm not going to say I don't care, because I do care, because I'm always going to care about Indiana basketball. I grew up in this state. I grew up following this team. But I'm just kind of apathetic at this point. And I know apathy is like you don't care, but it's almost like they're just postponing the inevitable. If they do get to the NCAA tournament, okay, so you'll play Xavier, and that's a Xavier team that came so close to beating Marquette in the Big East tournament and could not get it done. Had Xavier won that game, similar to Indiana, they wouldn't be on the bubble. But they are on the bubble. And again, they could go either way as well. There's so much at play here. And again, Indiana had plenty of chances to avoid this situation. All you had to do was win one of those games that I mentioned. Win one. UCLA, Michigan at home, Maryland at home, Purdue on the road, Northwestern on the road would even probably have helped a little bit. Don't get blown out by Iowa. Don't get blown out by Nebraska. Neither of those teams are NCAA tournament teams, but they made you look stupid. Iowa made you look stupid from start to finish. And I don't know. You could also point to Indiana's weak non-conference schedule, which, again, I don't know why they scheduled UNC Greensboro, Sam Houston State, Miami of Ohio, UT Chattanooga, and Winthrop. Although, actually, I guess I might know why they scheduled those games. It's because when they went to Atlantis, they got slaughtered by Louisville and Gonzaga. Now, Louisville ended up being pretty good. Gonzaga ended up being okay. Actually, they're still good because they're Gonzaga in March, so I will never count them out. That Louisville team was a lot better than I was expecting. Pat Kelsey did a fantastic job there. His job not done. In his first season, where I believe the Cardinals won 19 more games than they did a season ago. Saw him celebrating in the stands with Louisville fans in their final home regular season game, which was pretty cool. But if Indiana goes to the Bahamas and doesn't get embarrassed like they did, you win one of those games, either Gonzaga or Louisville. Providence was bad this year. But you win one of those games, and you're not in this situation. All you needed was one. So you've got Louisville, Gonzaga. That's 2. I'm going to say Nebraska. That would have been a quad 1 win. That's 3. Iowa's 4. Northwestern is 5. Maryland 6. At Purdue is 7. Michigan is 8. UCLA is 9. So you had, and if you want to count the Big Ten tournament against Oregon, then that's 10. 10 opportunities at least. You could have won one of those games and you would be in. Maybe Nebraska and Iowa is a stretch, but at the time, those would have been quad 1 wins. So 1 of 10 of your bad losses to good teams, win 1. That's all I'm asking for. And you're in the big dance, but it didn't happen. So when you don't just look at it from the lens of the Big Ten tournament, because there's way more to it than that. And yeah, it's easy to say that the Big Ten tournament was the most recent game and you had a big opportunity, and yeah, Indiana did have a big opportunity. Oregon had to fly about 2,000 miles for that game. They were tipping off at 9 a.m. Pacific time in Indianapolis. Of course, noon Eastern on Thursday. That's 9 a.m. Pacific, kind of like when Washington came to town for football. Which, you blew up the Pac-12, so this is what you have to deal with now. But Oregon, it didn't matter to them when they played Indiana. The Hoosiers fell by 13 in Indianapolis, and now, like I said, their fate is pretty much entirely in the hands of the selection committee, and I do not know which way it's going to go. But if you're Indiana, I'd imagine you'll be sweating bullets the entire time during Selection Sunday. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you, reminding you that it's a great time to save at IU Credit Union. Go to iucu.org to see their most current money market savings and certificate rates. That's iucu.org, IU Credit Union. On the women's side for Indiana basketball, they did enough. They're going to be in. They will probably avoid a play-in. According to Charlie Cream's bracketology, Indiana is one of the last 4 byes on the women's side. And last I checked, Indiana would go to Fort Worth. A couple weeks ago, it was Notre Dame where Indiana was projected to go on the women's side. But, of course, the top 4 seeds in each region will host the first 2 rounds. So for Indiana, they would face Vanderbilt, and if they win, they'd face TCU in the round of 32, assuming TCU gets by Stephen F. Austin, which is not a guarantee. But the women's team has done more than enough to get in. And if you're an Indiana women's basketball fan, I'd feel cautiously optimistic about their chances at creating a little bit of chaos in March. They took USC down to the wire in the Big Ten tournament. Of course, USC went on to lose to UCLA, I believe. I don't know why I cannot, for the life of me, keep the West Coast schools straight in my head. Because prior to this year, when I followed in passing Pac-12 sports, it was always just that, both USC and UCLA are really, really good at women's basketball. And that was pretty much the gist of it. UCLA did get the last laugh in the Big Ten tournament. And Indiana took USC, the Big Ten regular season champion, down to the wire, losing by 5. And again, Terry Morin said that she feels good about where Indiana women's basketball is right now. Because if they can hang with USC, of course, and UCLA both, national championship favorites coming out of the Big Ten, classic Big Ten teams from Los Angeles, California. So if Indiana can hang with them, they can hang with anybody. And you think back to last season when Indiana played the number 1 overall seed and eventual national champion South Carolina. That was a game where Indiana was down big. I believe they were down 16, 17 points. Came back and nearly tied it. But ultimately, I think gave South Carolina the closest game that they would play in the NCAA tournament. That was in the Sweet 16 last year. So I will never count out a Terry Morin coach team in March. Obviously, this will be way more of an uphill battle, as we have seen this season play out as more of an uphill battle than years past, which again makes sense when you lose your All-American post player. But all things considered, where Indiana was at the beginning of the season on the women's side, losing to Harvard and Butler back-to-back, that was brutal. I remember thinking, whoa, this is trouble. But they won enough games that they needed to win, and they'll find a way into the field of 68. And you look at it, again, on the men's side, I just don't know that that's the case. There are some projections that have Indiana in. Others have Indiana out. And again, when I look at these projections, I'm just going by ESPN's bracketology, which I understand is inherently biased against teams from the Big Ten. Whether you think it is or not, it is. Because ESPN, of course, SEC, ACC, Big 12, no money tied up with the Big Ten. So that's why I think that Indiana is not getting necessarily a fair shake from ESPN, but also I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana doesn't get into the field. Or if they just end up in a play-in game, which, that would be 2 first fours for Mike Woodson in 4 years. Missing the field once and making the field of 64 once, but being in the play-in twice. I don't know. I don't know. After Indiana beat Ohio State on senior day, you're thinking, if you're Mike Woodson, maybe I'm leaving a little bit too early. I don't think so. I think that this is the right time for Indiana to go a different direction. Mike Woodson will always have a seat at the table at Assembly Hall for what he accomplished as a player. But his tenure as a coach, definitely leaving a lot to be desired, though it is worth saying that he's leaving the program in a better place than he found it. It's just not the place that a lot of people were expecting it to be in, I think. Again, because when you come in and you promise winning Big Ten championships, fighting for national titles, and neither of those things have even come close to happening, people are going to be a little bit frustrated. But you consider where Indiana was after the pandemic season, 2020-21, when they fired Archie Miller. Yeah, Indiana's in a better spot than that because Archie won less than half of his Big Ten games. And that trend in conference play has continued at Rhode Island for Archie Miller, where the Spiders, I think they are, not doing very hot. Their season is definitely over. And Archie Ball, I like to think about I don't like to think about it, but when I think of Archie Ball, I think of the game where Indiana held Purdue to 48 points and lost at Assembly Hall. That's Archie Ball. That did not happen under Mike Woodson, at least to my knowledge. Indiana did find creative, heartbreaking ways to lose, but it was by scoring more than 45 points, at least. Still, though, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I would say that Creighton did the same thing last night in the Big East Tournament championship game against St. John's. But I was thinking about this. The way St. John's just completely buried Creighton in that game was incredible. That's what I feel like we never saw Indiana do that. With the one exception being the win over Purdue at Assembly Hall. Purdue melted down in that game. It was incredible to watch. I'd never seen anything like it from them in this era of Purdue basketball. But other than that, I've never seen Indiana this season bury an opponent after being down. Creighton was up as much as 8 at Madison Square Garden last night, but Rick Pitino and the St. John's Red Storm, led by R.J. Lewis Jr., who was electrifying. He had 2 second-half points, came out in the second, or 2 first-half points, came out after halftime and scored, I think it was 23 in the second half, to give St. John's their first Big East tournament title in 25 years. So that was pretty cool. That was really cool. And it goes to show that, yeah, Rick Pitino's on the old side, right? But he's now won a conference tournament at 5 different schools, which is nuts. Nuts to think about. Rick Pitino, born in 1952, but the game clearly has not passed him by. 72 years old and still rolling along. I heard some people saying that, they want Rick Pitino in Bloomington, to which I will say, so what? You get him for 1 year, he retires, and then we're right back here in a year's time? No. Let's not. I don't know how many people are throwing his name around. I just had some friends talking about it, and you want to shut that down pretty quick because I don't think Rick Pitino would be good in Bloomington just because he's old and he's not going to leave St. John's. I don't think he might retire there at this rate. I have no sources to back that up. That's just conjecture. Speaking of conjecture, the whole discourse around Brad Stevens and Will Wade and unfortunately Chris Beard, I think for what it's worth that nobody knows anything about this coaching search. Anybody who says they have sources that are reliable is a liar. There's absolutely a ton of smoke, but no fire, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people are, doing the thing where you track people's flights or flights that you think certain people are taking, when in reality it's nobody knows what's happening. Will Wade, his name has been thrown around. As long as Indiana gets Amir Khan, the student manager, with Will Wade, that's a great hire. But the question with him will always be, winning at McNeese is great, but the pressure of the Big Ten and the pressure of the Indiana job is so much higher. And it's a question of whether or not you can handle that step up. I don't know the answer. But that would be my biggest bugaboo with him. With Brad Stevens, let's be realistic. He's in one of the most secure jobs in the NBA right now. I don't think he's going to take a pay cut to coach college basketball, considering especially that he hasn't coached college basketball in over a decade at this point. Yeah, obviously what he did at Butler was great, but Indiana could have hired him then. Indiana could have hired him back in 2012 if they wanted to. Didn't do it, but they could have. Indiana also could have hired him in 2021. And, there's a rumor that he and his family voted on it. He wanted to go. His family said no, so he didn't leave Boston. But I feel like if he really wanted the job, he would have come to Bloomington. It didn't happen. I don't think Brad Stevens will come to Indiana. I just don't. There's also TJ Otzelberger's name, although that's kind of cooled off. Again, nobody knows anything. But I wouldn't mind TJ Otzelberger, if nothing else, just because he's young, relatively speaking. So you could see him here for the long haul. But I think that's ultimately just what Indiana fans want out of this hire. That's what you should want out of this hire is stability, because Indiana has gone through a bunch of different coaches in my lifetime, which has only been 21 years. I think Mike Davis, I'm trying to name them off the top of my head, Davis, Sampson. Do we count Dockich? I guess we do, because he did coach them. And then Crean, Archie Miller, and of course, Mike Woodson. So that's 6. That's about a coach every 3.5 years. Not good. Not good. Tom Crean was here, of course, for longer than 3.5 years. Yeah. And I don't know. I wouldn't mind him being back, but it's not going to happen. But I wouldn't mind, because at least he got Indiana to the Sweet 16 multiple times, and that hasn't happened since. So bring somebody in who can stay for the long haul, rebuild if that's what it takes, because I'd imagine the portal entries are going to be pretty active in Bloomington once probably before the national championship, because the portal's open right now. That's a whole nother conversation. But whoever comes in, be in it for the long haul. Give Indiana fans some stability, because that's what they're looking for. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. This is Selection Sunday, and we'll take a look at the whole field, because why not? The 1 seeds still, Auburn, Duke, Houston, and Florida. I feel like Auburn is no longer immortal, which is a big step down for them. Losing to Tennessee in the SEC semifinals yesterday and losing 3 of their last 4 games is Auburn. So, turns out they're human. Interesting. I think they'll still be a 1 seed, of course. But goes to show that, it's a cliche, right? But anybody can win. Anybody can beat anybody in the SEC. Anybody can win in March. On Florida's side, they scored 100 on Alabama. I mean, goodness gracious. Wow. I think Bama has given up, played 8 separate games in which they've allowed more than 90 points. I guess defense in the SEC might be optional. Who knows? That might come back to burn them once the NCAA tournament gets underway. We will have to see. And then Houston winning the Big 12 over Arizona. Kelvin Sampson winning a conference title while Indiana bows out in the first round. Very curious. It's just funny because he and Will Wade both, I'm pretty sure. Will Wade got nailed on recruiting violations at LSU. But at least Kelvin Sampson, I think everything that he did is legal now. And it just makes you think a little bit about how much times have changed in the world of college athletics, where it seems like now there are no rules. You look at what Owen Freeman did, the Iowa Post player, who thinks that he's better than Mackenzie Mbako. But I remind you that when those two went head-to-head as freshmen, Mackenzie Mbako stuffed him in a locker. So Freeman goes on after Iowa beats Indiana at Carver Hawkeye this season and runs his mouth and says, yeah, there was no co-Big Ten Freshman of the Year. It was actually just me. Well, no, that's not what the record books show. Oh, and by the way, Owen Freeman, I wish that Iowa fans would have known on a wide scale that you were checked out pretty much the entire season. And you have entered the portal with a do not contact tag, which means that in all likelihood, you are taking offers during the season and you already know where you're going. The thing that always kills me about the do not contact tag is that it's basically a player admitting that, yeah, I've been talking to other schools and I already know where I'm going. I think it's, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be something that's done about that. Maybe I sound like a bit of an old head, but that's just weird. I think if you're a player and you're a Freeman, very productive, certainly had no problem scoring or rebounding against Indiana this year. If you're a player like that, what does it say about your dedication to your team if it comes out now that, oh, by the way, yeah, I was talking to other schools the entire time that I was representing this school? I get it. It's at the end of the day, it's a business and you got to do what's best. But man, if I was one of Owen Freeman's teammates, I would be kind of disappointed. But rumor has it also, I don't know how true this is, but rumor has it Freeman's old AAU coach was telling people that he was going to leave while the season was going on. And again, if he entered the portal with a do not contact tag like he did Owen Freeman, then yeah, wouldn't surprise me if somebody was running around saying, oh no, he's gone. Don't listen to people. He's not coming back to Iowa. The Hawkeyes dismissing head coach Fran McCaffery, which makes me disappointed because I liked seeing Fran McCaffery get ejected and get mad. Great theater. Great theater. But unfortunately, his time is done. Which stinks. It stinks because, like I said, it was very entertaining to watch him crash out. As we look at the 2 seeds across the country, it'll probably be Michigan State, Alabama, St. John's, and Tennessee in no particular order. So, out of all of those, I would say Michigan State. I would say Michigan State is scary because it's the Big Ten, or because it's Tom Izzo. But the Big Ten in March Madness just does not scare me. Outside of Purdue last year, which was basically a super team, as close as they're going to get to a super team. By the way, slight tangent. What in the world is Purdue doing when it comes to not posting final scores on their social media every time they lose? I understand. I'm minoring in sport marketing, so I understand where they might be coming from with, we don't want to post negative news about our brand, about our organization, right? Because it could reflect poorly on us. And fans are already disappointed enough, so we don't need to add fuel to the fire. But you are the team's official account, right? You don't have to. You could turn off replies if you want to. You could do what the Oakland A's did when they were catching flack for being cheapskates and having a not very good broadcast crew and playing in a dump and a whole host of other things, right? The A's turned off replies, but at least they still kept their fans updated while they lost 90 games or whatever it was. Every time Purdue loses now, the team just doesn't post the final score. Illinois beat them. They didn't post the final score. Purdue lost in the Big Ten tournament to Michigan. They didn't post the final score. I don't understand it. Indiana does it, and Indiana, I think, has one of the most toxic fan bases in the country on social media. But Indiana still posts the final score every time. Indiana baseball posts the final score every time, and on every loss, and every reply section of every loss, fans are calling for the pitching coach to be fired. Which, it's with all the guys that he's gotten to MLB, I feel like he's not going anywhere. Some of those fans misspell his name, too, which is really funny. Dustin Glant. They add a D in his last name when there isn't one. But IU baseball still posts the final scores, right? When Indiana women's basketball lost to Harvard and Butler, they posted the final scores. But for some reason, Purdue doesn't post the final scores on social media every time they lose now. And, I'm sure not a lot of fans are relying exclusively on that account for updates, but you are the team's official account. What are you doing? I get it. It reflects poorly on you, but it's a fact. It's how the game went. Sport is a zero-sum industry. There's always a winner and a loser. And ultimately, at the end of the season, in the case of NCAA men's basketball at the Division I level, there are 363 losers and one winner. In the case of every single sport, in the case of Major League Baseball, right? 29 losers, one winner. In the case of college baseball, like 300 losers and one winner. But all those teams still keep their fans updated on what's going on because it's important. So Purdue's got to do better. But, there are some very soft fans up in West Lafayette, a lot of whom I don't even think actually know the rules of basketball. Because if you go to Mackey Arena and you watch a game, every single time a foul is called against Purdue, the fans are booing incessantly, even if it's a correct call. Whew. Yeah, they got a lot of things to figure out in West Lafayette. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Hi, Karen, IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rotacap with you. And I was thinking, because the Chicago Cubs are in Japan right now, they were actually playing on exhibition earlier. They just won that exhibition 4-2. I'm thinking about baseball, and I'm thinking about how if you're in Bloomington over the next 2 weeks, and by and large over the next 2 months, and you have a chance to go to an IU baseball game, I suggest you do so. IU will be home for 12 of their next 15 games. The lone exception being next weekend when they go out to Los Angeles to take on classic Big Ten baseball powerhouse UCLA. But Indiana will spend a lot of time here in Bloomington in late March and April, so it will either be rainy and 40 degrees like it is today, or like it was on Friday and it might be sunny and 75. Indiana in the series finale against Ohio State today at 1 at Bart Kaufman Field. If you're going to go, I suggest you bundle up. But I was there on Friday. I covered the team, and Game 2 of that doubleheader was fantastic. Indiana trailed from the top of the first. We're down 7-3 entering the bottom of the 8th inning when a bunch of freshmen decided it was their time to take over and to be the ones to lift Indiana to victory on the offensive side. Very impressive stuff from some names that you probably might not recognize if you're not familiar with college baseball, and I don't blame you if you're not, because the Big Ten usually does a pretty poor job of marketing it. And playing the conference tournament in Omaha, where only Nebraska fans really ever show up, maybe some Iowa fans, right? But really it's a bunch of home games for Nebraska, and that's about it. Big Ten hasn't won a national title since 1966. All that is to say, there are better conferences, but college baseball is electric no matter what level you watch. It's chaotic. It's fun. On Friday night, Indiana trailed by 4 entering the bottom of the 8th inning. And it was a couple freshmen who got the rally started. Cooper Malamazian, the freshman third baseman, who, if you don't know the name, I would learn the name. He tied the Big Ten freshman record for doubles in a game last weekend at Penn State. And in the 8th inning against Ohio State on Friday night, hit his first career homer, a 2-run shot into the bullpen to make it 7-5. And then Indiana pitcher Cole Gilley just transferred from Indiana State, which has actually been more successful in the postseason than Indiana has each of the last 2 years. Gilley transferred over from Indiana State. He came out for the 9th inning, and he told us after the game he had to turn up his PitchCom, which, of course, is the device that pitchers and catchers use to relay pitch type and location. He said he had to turn it up because the fans were so loud. Indiana tied it in the bottom of the 8th, and the crowd was re-energized going into the 9th. Obviously, Indiana would have a chance to walk it off if Gilley could hold Ohio State scoreless in the 9th. That's exactly what he did. And he said that after the second out of the inning, the fans were so loud that he couldn't hear the pitch call. I don't remember the last time that's happened at Bart Kaufman Field. I've been in some loud environments in college baseball. Probably the loudest one was in Tennessee when Indiana went down to Knoxville back in May. Those fans were ridiculous. They were incredible. They were incredible, and with the team as good as they are, I don't blame them. I think Tennessee might be better this season than they were last season. And last season, they went 60-12. The Volunteers have started 19-0 on the diamond. Tony Vitello's team is just absurd. Just absurd. They mercy ruled Florida yesterday, and Florida's no slouch. So, all that is to say, I've been in a lot of loud environments in college baseball, but I've never seen Bart Kaufman Field in Bloomington like it was on Friday night. So, if you have a chance to go see Indiana baseball play at Bart Kaufman Field or somewhere else, wherever that may be, I suggest you do it because it is fun to watch. Indiana's got one of the best offenses in the country. They've got 2 MLB draft picks hitting in their top 3. One of whom will be drafted probably in the top 20 overall, Devin Taylor. And who knows, Corbin Dickerson might be right behind him. Dickerson transferred from Louisville, where he barely played, comes to Indiana, and he's hit 10 homers in 18 games. Yeah. He hit his 10th homer against Ohio State on Friday afternoon, game 1 of that doubleheader. It's not very sustainable pace that he's on right now, but he's on for about 40 homers. If Indiana were to say play 60 games, he would be on for somewhere between 35 and 40 home runs, which would be so far beyond the single season record at Indiana, it's not even funny. But Devin Taylor, a 3-year starter, will go down in the record books as, I would say, he will be one of the greatest hitters in Indiana program history, better than Kyle Schwarber was when he was here. That's how good Devin Taylor is. I don't remember Kyle Schwarber at Indiana, mostly because I was 9 years old when he played. I have seen the numbers. I've seen him mashing baseballs, and Devin Taylor is just as good, if not better. So, Indiana baseball, very fun team. The pitching staff is very hit or miss, but on Friday they were on, and they looked really good. And that's the kind of team that Indiana can be. They have struggled through the first month of the season. They spent pretty much all of that on the road, but now that they're back home, this may be the start of a little bit of a run. They're now back over 500 for the first time this season. 3-2 in the Big Ten. They'll go for the sweep of Ohio State today at 1 o'clock. And if you ever want some IU baseball coverage, I'm your guy at Nick Rodecap, NickRodecap on Twitter. That is where you can find me musing about college baseball and sometimes other things too. We have fun. We have fun over there. But college baseball is fun. It's supposed to be fun. And, these guys, they work extremely hard. And outside of the SEC, the ACC used to be the Pac-12, right? The now defunct Pac-12. College baseball, I feel like, doesn't get the coverage it deserves because especially ESPN, they really don't care about it until the College World Series, which is a shame because there is so much that leads up to it that is just as worthy of being seen. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you, reminding you that it's a great time to save at IU Credit Union. Go to iucu.org to see their most current money market savings and certificate rates. That's iucu.org, IU Credit Union. And it is Selection Sunday, of course. That is not good news for Indiana basketball. Selfishly, I hope that they go to Dayton, just because I think that would be the best for Indiana fans to at least have a chance to will them to a win. Will it count as an NCAA tournament win if it's the first 4? I don't know. I don't think it should, because that's just you playing for the right to make the field of 64. It's not that you're actually in. But we'll see. We'll see what happens tonight after the Big Ten championship between Michigan and Wisconsin, which, Indiana could have had Dusty May, Michigan head coach, playing for a Big Ten title in his first season. But no, Indiana stuck with Mike Woodson and bowed out in the first round. That's fine. Everything's fine. Ugh. That's all I could think when Trey Donaldson was running the length of the floor and laying it up over pretty much the entire Maryland defense to win that semifinal game yesterday. Was up. Yep. Indiana could have had the guy who probably drew up that play, but they decided not to get him, and instead he went to Michigan. And now he's locked up there with a $70 bajillion buyout, and he's not going to come to Bloomington. A place that, gave him his start in college basketball. Wouldn't that be poetic? No, well, that would make too much sense. Oh, he's from Indiana. Oh, that's great. Yep. Don't hire him. Don't even think about him. It's just, I hope that Indiana hits this coaching hire out of the park. I was talking about it earlier, but I think all Indiana fans want is some stability. Off the top of my head, Indiana's had 6 coaches in my lifetime, and my lifetime has barely been 20 years. 21, fine. Barely been 21 years. 6 head coaches. Yeah. Not an encouraging trend, but one that can still change if Indiana makes the right hire. I don't know who it's going to be. I have absolutely no clue. I don't think anybody has any clue. I think anybody who says that they have sources that say they have a clue is probably not telling the truth and instead just trying to, I don't know, clickbait you, something like that. I don't know. I can tell you, though, that I don't think anybody knows what the heck is going on. Other than that Indiana hired the same search firm that they used to find Curt Cignetti. So that should inspire some confidence because that search firm obviously nailed that hire. So who's to say they can't do it again? Not me, because that would require imposing limitations on myself. And Curt Cignetti taught me that that's a bad idea. And I am really hopeful for the sake of the state of mind of the Indiana basketball fan base that this next hire is a good one. Because what Oumar Ballo said after the Big Ten tournament lost to Oregon about how, he was getting mean messages from people every time Indiana would lose, which included death threats. Not cool, but that's the reality. And I thought what David West said in response was really interesting. David West, of course, the former Indiana Pacer, longtime professional basketball player. Oumar Ballo is complaining about death threats and complaining about the messages of criticism and mean words from people in the IU fan base after Indiana loses. David West said, "You want the bag? This comes with it. You want to make money? Then you're going to be treated like, professionals, right? Because that is really what college athletics has become, especially in the revenue sports where players are making a lot of money. A lot. The NIL numbers aren't public, but we've got a rough idea of what a lot of bigger players make. Oumar Ballo rumored, this is not official, rumored 7 figures. One of the top guys in the portal, one of the most accomplished big men in the portal last year. I believe he was the top transfer. 7 figures, I would say, is a reasonable estimate. So if you're making that kind of money, then you're going to get that kind of criticism. I'm not saying it's right, but it happens all the time in professional sports. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not condoning it because it's not okay to send death threats to athletes. At the end of the day, these guys are human. But this is the reality of what happens, right? David West said, listen, money is involved. Expectations are different. Productivity, professionalism, and personal accountability come with the pro sports environment. The college level is rapidly becoming that. Y'all want the bag? This comes with it. That was longtime Indiana Pacer David West. So I think he's right. Although I will add that I don't know that the college level is rapidly becoming pro sports. I think it already is pro sports. It's not exactly a hot take, but the moment that teams just started overtly paying players to come to their schools, I think it became professional sports. There is a massive amount of money wrapped up in college sports. Media deals that rival any sports league in the nation, except probably the NFL and NBA. But $7 billion in the Big Ten media contract. Now, that's not just men's basketball, obviously. It's also football and every other sport. But a good chunk of that is basketball money. So David West is right. If you want the bag, this is what's going to come with it. And I think if you're Oumar Ballo talking about the fake fans, right? The fans who sent those death threats. I would argue that, they're not even fans at all. A lot of them are probably sports bettors. Because Zeke Mayo, I believe it was, I'd have to check. I'd have to make sure that it was him. I want to double check this. Kansas player who a couple weeks ago posted screenshots of Instagram messages that he received from people that I cannot repeat, but they're out there if you want to find them. Suffice it to say, it was similar to what Oumar Ballo was speaking about. Death threats from fans after Mayo played a poor game. In Oumar Ballo's case, it was every time Indiana lost because Ballo, of course, one of the biggest names in the country, and he's on Indiana's roster. So Zeke Mayo talks about how he got death threats, and he posts the screenshots to Twitter, and it blows up, and it's a whole thing. It's a lot of that is from people, and this is just the reality, people who put money on these guys on sports books, and then, oh no, it doesn't go my way, it's the player's fault, I'm going to go harass him directly. But the reality is that these guys who do this stuff, they're not men, because they wouldn't be able to stand up to these players face to face. So they hide behind a screen and they do it on Instagram because they think it's anonymous, right? They think, oh, this will never come back to me. And then, oh no, the screenshots got aired and now I'm going to lose my job, right? I don't know if any of the people who sent Zeke Mayo death threats lost their jobs, but it's very possible that they could. Because what are you doing sending death threats to what is Zeke Mayo, 21 years old, right? He's not very old. At most, he's 23. Born in 2002. Yeah, so he'll be 23 in December. Great. So yeah, you're harassing a 22-year-old college basketball player on Twitter because he sold your parlay. I think that's a problem. I think that's a very big problem. And I've said this before, not on here, I don't think, but I've been of the belief for a while that legalizing sports betting was a net negative for society. And I just, it's one of the only downfalls of watching sports as much as I and millions of other people, billions of other people around the world do, right? Millions in the United States, is that you cannot watch a sporting event now at any, whether it's college or professional, on television. You can't watch a sporting event without being inundated with sports betting advertisements. And I think that's a problem because a good chunk of the sport consumer viewer base, right, just for NFL games, college basketball, college football, a good chunk of those viewers are under 21. They cannot legally bet on sports. There are some states where it's 18. But a lot of those viewers are children watching with their parents or with their friends or, I don't know, just in a social setting, right? But they're under the legal age to gamble. And they see these advertisements, and I just can't help but think that it's sort of I don't know if subliminal message is the right word, but it's almost like you're planting the seeds of sports betting in their heads before they can legally do it. And then the moment that they become legally allowed to bet on sports, or even sometimes before that, there are plenty of illegal sports betting operations out there that people partake in. There are some people that do it at Indiana University, and there is a lot of money involved. But these kids would not know about sports betting if it wasn't being advertised literally everywhere because it's legal now. And it's been legal for a while. This isn't new, right? But I think it's been a net negative for society. I really do. And the reason number one is, of course, that it is a losing game. There is a reason that FanDuel has so much money to advertise places, right? There's a reason. There's a reason that the Colts, I believe they're partnered with Caesar Sportsbook. Like, there's a reason these books have money to sponsor the most expensive sport entities in the United States, if not the world, save for FIFA and the IOC. It's because so many people lose so many bets all the time. It's not, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as Vegas and casinos. And that was one thing when I went to Vegas last winter. It was for a club bowling trip. I didn't bet a dime of my own money, mostly because I wasn't 21. There's not a whole lot to do in Vegas besides lose your money. That was one thing that I noticed. Like, yeah, the mountains are cool. The weather was nice, but I just, everything in Vegas revolves around gambling. And you look at it and you think, this city wasn't built for free. That money had to come from somewhere. Most of it probably came from gamblers who lost. So if you win a 10-leg parlay, that's great. Never bet again, because you will lose that money in the long run. So all that is to come back to Umar Ballo talking about receiving death threats, David West saying that it comes with it because you've been able to bet on sports for a while nationwide. Well, not nationwide, but in most states. And honestly, I think that for the states that have not legalized sports betting, they shouldn't. I feel like they will. I feel like it's inevitable that it's going to happen. I mean, it's not just sport, like linear sport television, or say broadcasts on Peacock or Paramount Plus or whatever. It's also on like sport YouTube channels. There's a basketball YouTuber named Jimmy High Roller. He's got like 5 million subscribers on YouTube, who takes sponsorships from DraftKings. And again, his videos made for basketball fans of all ages on their face. And I would assume, because the YouTube viewer demographic is on the younger side, a lot of his viewers are under the legal age to gamble. But they see these advertisements, and you're gullible, right? So you think, maybe I should do that. And then you turn 21, you lose money on a sportsbook, and boom, you feed the machine. That's the way I see it. Maybe it's cynical, maybe it's a little bit pessimistic, right? But if a lot of people, for example, weren't betting on Kansas basketball, which if you bet on Kansas basketball this year, you were stupid because they had a terrible year, relative to their standards anyway. Hunter Dickinson broke them, I think. He and A.J. Storr made them worse. But I think that, betting on these players, these player props or the team, whatever, over, under, team to cover the spread, all sorts of stuff that you can bet on. The players don't do what you put money on them to do, and suddenly you think it's their fault. That's a problem. And you should never feel that it's okay to send death threats to anyone, not just college athletes, obviously, but anybody, because it's just a cowardly thing to do. And at the end of the day, these guys are human beings, first and foremost. And I think they deserve better than that. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you, talking about money in college sports and how the two mix about as well as oil and water. Steve Alford, a name, of course, IU fans know very well. A couple days ago, of course, Steve Alford coaching at Nevada now. So they lost to Colorado State in the Mountain West tournament back on Thursday night. And Steve Alford was talking about the new model of not just NIL, but the transfer portal, the way recruiting has changed, that sort of thing. And he described it as utterly ridiculous. And again, maybe, you could be respondent to that by saying, the future is now, old man. But we've heard the term Wild West get thrown around a lot. It might be overused, but I do think it has some truth to it. That Steve Alford says, he goes on this 3-minute tangent. I wouldn't call it a tangent. I think it's important. He talks for 3 minutes about it. He starts by saying 5 years ago, he wasn't in the conversation, saying to a player, how much do you want to be paid? And Alford continues saying that he doesn't believe student athletes should not be compensated, but the way that it is right now is utterly ridiculous, and it's completely changed the game. I think he's right. Because on its face, when NIL was legalized in July of 2021, it seemed like a good idea, right? Players can sign deals with local companies, they can sign autographs, they can get compensated just for being who they are. That on its face is not a bad thing, right? Because, it's the social media era, athletes are brands, right? And it gives them an opportunity to make some money in college the same way any other college student could. And that was always one of the arguments for proponents of NIL, was that, so if I'm a regular college student and I'm famous, I can sign brand deals. But the moment I play a university-sanctioned sport, I can no longer do that. Now they can, right? That's fine, because the term student athlete, You're a student at the university who happens to be very good at the sport that they play. That, though, has been so perverted, so far removed from the original impetus that it is no longer the case. And this article from Nevada Sportsnet continues. Coaches are forbidden, of course, from directly negotiating financial deals with players through name, image, and likeness. But all serious programs have third-party NIL collectives. At IU, it's Hoosiers Connect and Hoosiers for Good. There are two. Hoosiers Connect is, I think, the one with the most money. All serious programs have third-party NIL collectives, like Hoosiers Connect, that receive money from boosters and pay players what are essentially salaries. That, combined with the transfer portal allowing for unrestricted player movement, has made college hoops a year-to-year roster evolution rather than a more traditional program building of yesteryear. So this is where, we go back to what David West was talking about in the last segment about how college sports is becoming increasingly like pro sports with all the money involved. It's just free agency every single year, right? These players, and a lot of these players have had their egos inflated so much by this. They think, especially in football, this is really bad. These players think they are worth so much more than they actually are. And it's become a huge problem. I think it's become a huge problem. You've got guys, they don't get playing time year one. They'll transfer because they either have an agent in their ear telling them that they're worth more, that they deserve more playing time. Maybe they think they were slighted. They just leave if they don't get the playing time that they thought they would get. It happened in IU baseball last year. There was a kid named Hayden Carlson who came into Indiana as a middle infielder, which means he came in as a high school shortstop, because in college baseball, every single middle infielder and some third baseman as well, every single one of them was the dude at their high school, which meant that they were the starting shortstop. So a lot of them come in and they might delude themselves into thinking that they deserve a spot at shortstop from day one. Playing shortstop in college is so much harder than playing in high school. But Hayden Carlson came in, thought that he was going to play shortstop over Tyler Cerny, who was coming in as the returning starter, and he was going to play shortstop from day one because he spent time his freshman year, played every game at second base, and learned under a veteran shortstop before him named Philip Glasser. Carlson comes in, thinks he's going to take Cerny's spot, doesn't take his spot, gets a little bit of run at second base, wasn't very good, quite frankly. You look at his numbers, they were bad. So he transferred out. Because in his words, in the social media announcement that he made, he was looking for an opportunity to compete for the starting job at shortstop at a Division I school in a power conference. This is a kid who was a true freshman, played a little bit, did not produce, and thought that he was worthy of being a starting shortstop. That's the kind of thing that a lot of players are told when they enter the transfer portal now. They think that they're worth more money than they are. And you've got these NIL collectives now that are basically, it's not really a big thing in Big Ten baseball. I don't think there's a lot of NIL money there, but the premise is the same. It's that these NIL collectives are basically just throwing bags of money at these players in football and men's basketball especially, hoping that they'll come to the school because of the dollar signs. That, I think, is what happened with Indiana basketball this year. Steve Alford, of course, being the starter of this whole conversation, that the recruiting model is completely ridiculous. Indiana has basically unlimited NIL money, especially for basketball, because there are a lot of people with a lot of money who want to see Indiana basketball succeed. So you look at the transfer portal guys that Indiana brings in, Umar Ballo, the best center in the Pac-12, at least the best center in the portal out of the Pac-12. Miles Rice, the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Kanan Carlisle, who was a decent player, believe it or not, at Stanford. But you wouldn't know that based on how he played this year. But anyway, so you've got the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, the best transfer center in the country in Umar Ballo. And oh, by the way, you also have to pay to keep your guys from transferring out. So big money bags to Malik Reneau, Mackenzie Mbako, and Trey Galloway, which Trey Galloway, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. Trey Galloway's a Hoosier. He's from Indiana. That's great. He's not worth $500,000. Are you kidding me? But that's around how much money he made in 1 year, right? And just because you have that money and you can bring in these mercenaries doesn't mean you're going to have a good team. But that is now a component of recruiting, and it is a massive component. So Steve Alford, I think, is right. Maybe I sound like an old head. Maybe I sound like an old man. But the student-athlete premise is dead in college sports. And Steve Alford says coaches complain to each other before every game about players constantly moving around and impacting impacting the academic side of college athletics. Alford continues in this Nevada Sportsnet article. You've got to adapt. We've got to adapt, but every coach does. Every handshake I have before the games, it's brought up every game. Me and the opposing coach are going to talk about portal issues and where's academics. I've talked to my compliance guys. What's the academic progress report anymore? You can't control it? It's a JUCO, community college. You're going to have to replace 8 or 9 guys on a roster every year. The travel time that is across the country in these leagues, it makes no sense for that to be our model, but that is our model. Alford talking about that. The Big Ten is the perfect example. It's also the case in the Big 12 and other conferences as well. It's so funny to me, by the way. UCF and BYU are in the same conference. UCF travels from Orlando, Florida, to Provo, Utah, to play BYU in a baseball series this weekend. And Game 2, which was yesterday, was delayed because of snow. A team from Florida playing a baseball game in March could not start on time because the place they were playing got snow. That is the state of college athletics right now. So, Steve Alford talking about the academic side of things. They're not student athletes anymore. I think football might really be the only exception because football plays either, at least for the Big Ten, right? If you're Indiana, you're only going to play one of 2 days out of the week. It's either going to be Friday or Saturday. So you can travel on Thursday. That's what Curt Cignetti likes to do. Travel as late as possible, get to the place, play the game, go home. You might miss class on Thursday and Monday, right? But you're not going to miss that much class relative to other sports. I have class with 2 men's basketball players, and I'm not going to name them, but I have class with 2 men's basketball players. They showed up to this class on the first day with no backpacks. One of them is in a group project with me. Again, they showed up on the first day with no backpacks. This player who is in my group has done nothing for this project, aside from sending me a screenshot saying that he didn't have access to a document that I shared with the group. I gave him access and he made no changes. They have since been to class one other time, and we are halfway through the semester. They have been to class twice in, 8 weeks? Because part of it is, I don't know if this is all of it, but part of it is you spend so much time traveling, especially for college basketball, that you're not ever actually going to class. And there was that story about North Carolina a few years back where they basically made up fake classes for their players so they could remain academically eligible. They were getting A's, but these classes, they weren't actually learning anything. And I think this is only going to get worse. IU Athletics a few months ago laid off 12 employees, or 13 employees, and got rid of 12 vacant positions to get ready for revenue sharing, which is coming down the pipe this fall, where athletes will be paid directly from the schools, and the schools have up to $20.5 million for all sports. $20.5 million directly from the schools. That money has to come from somewhere. People get laid off here in Indiana because of that. The positions that are vacant, 12 of them got cut from the athletic department. On the media side, this is a very minor thing, but it's something they changed prior to this year. For every sport besides football, there is no longer catered food. You get a concession voucher instead, which is worth far less. $10 worth of concession voucher is nothing at an IU athletics event. You can get one hot dog and a bottle of water, and you will still have to pay money. It costs $10 for a beer at Assembly Hall. So this revenue sharing is only going to make this problem worse. There's a lot of talk that non-rev sports might become club sports, or the varsity sport model might change for sports like swim and dive. As somebody who covered Indiana swim and dive my freshman year, that is one of the most accomplished, if not the most accomplished programs at Indiana. Could you imagine them turning that into a club sport because they need to pay football and basketball players? There are a lot of people who would be very upset. So this all started a long time ago. And I understand, what happened to Johnny Manziel, right? When he was at Texas A&M. They renovated their football stadium basically entirely on the back of the revenue that he generated when he was there as their quarterback. He saw almost none of that money. That's not fair. Johnny Manziel deserved to be compensated more than he was for the amount of attention that he brought to Texas A&M football. That stadium Kyle Field would not look the way it does without Johnny Manziel. So in a situation like that, yeah, the player deserves to be compensated for his efforts. But what we have now is professional sports at the college level and the illusion of the student athlete. But the student athlete no longer exists. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rotocap with you on IU Sports Sunday. Thinking about how, if you hear me talking about how college athletics is dead, you might think I'm, 51 rather than 21. I want to make it clear that it's not like I don't believe student athletes should be paid. I absolutely do believe they should be compensated for their name, image, and likeness, for the work that they do in building themselves as a brand, and being able to profit off of that is not a bad thing. Like, I'll use the example of an obscure wide receiver named DeColdest Crawford. He signed an NIL deal with an air conditioning company because he wants to make sure that your house can be the coldest it can be. I think that's a good thing. I think if, what was it, like Aiden Fisher did a spot with Harold Fish Incorporated, a local company, yeah, cool. IU football player, Bloomington company, it's a no-brainer. But when money is involved, you can pretty much throw the rules out the window. And what NIL has become, again, with these NIL collectives, which, the NCAA might be cracking down on it now, but just like most things the NCAA does, they've completely failed because they're almost 4 years late to the party. When you have recruits at Texas, football recruits, going on official visits, keep in mind, these kids are in high school, 16, 17, maybe 18 years old. Teenagers. They go to Texas football on an official visit and they see Lamborghinis the moment they pull up to campus. It's just dollar signs everywhere. So you've got these kids coming in, oh, wow, Lamborghini, I want to go play at Texas. Back in November, Will Howard, Ohio State quarterback, transferred over from Kansas State and is playing in his first and only game versus Michigan, and says, it's not a game, it's a lifestyle, or something to that tune. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically he says that the game is the most important thing, right? Ohio State went on to lose that game because I think Will Howard was playing with a concussion. But anyway, Howard talks about how important the game is to him. Dude, you spent the first 4 seasons of your career somewhere else and then transferred to Ohio State because they offered you more money than anybody else. You're lying through your teeth to try to appease the fan base that paid you to go there. That's a problem. And I think you're seeing this around the country now. It's not unique anywhere. It's not unique to anything. But you hear a lot of fans talking about how they don't recognize the rosters anymore because it's no longer guys who have been with the program for 2, 3, 4 years. It's a bunch of hired guns. It's a bunch of mercenaries. You hear about these guys in college basketball and football who spend they start at one school, then they go to another, and then they go to another, and then they end up having success at their fourth school. There was a Xavier player, I remember Noah Eagle was talking about. Yeah, he started at Tulane and then transferred to Ohio State, wherever. Then he went to St. John's, and now he's at Xavier. Not exactly those schools, but you get the idea. That these guys just transfer wherever. If you transfer 3 times in 3 years, I don't think the school is the problem. I don't think the school is the problem at all. So I do think that we're going to have to, I say we, the NCAA is going to have to look itself in the mirror and figure this out very quickly. It's already too late. Because again, NIL collectives just throw bags of money at players, and the players have no connection to the university. They don't care about the name on their chest. They care about the name on the back of the jersey, right? They care about the NIL money. They don't care about the school. They care about the NIL money, and they care about advancing their own careers. They don't care about the school that they're playing for. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, happy Selection Sunday to those of you who celebrate one of the greatest days of the year in college sports. Indiana's odds to make the NCAA tournament, I know I was just talking about how bad gambling is, but I think it's important for the purpose of telling this story. Jon Rothstein, which again, sports betting is so pervasive, but the fact that a sports journalist like Jon Rothstein is partnered with FanDuel is just so bleak. So bleak. Like, oh man, it's so funny to me. Like, FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NFL, and you wonder why people question the integrity of the games. Oh, I don't know. On the NBA side, Terry Rozier from the Miami Heat, you look at some of his lowlights, and there's no way he's not betting against his own team. But yeah, DraftKings, an official gambling partner of the NBA. Like, what are we doing? Anyway, Jon Rothstein says, per FanDuel Sportsbook as of this morning, Indiana is minus 245 to make the NCAA tournament and plus 182 to miss it. UNC is plus 320 to make it, minus 480 to miss it, so they're probably out, which is good because they were 1-14 in quad one games. Xavier is pretty much a toss-up. Plus 108 to make it, minus 140 to miss it. It might be more of a 50-50 than Indiana is. So I guess that's good because the sportsbooks usually know something that we don't, which again is why they have so much money to spend on advertising, is because they always win. So, and I'm not just saying that because I made an NBA parlay and lost once. Although the way I lost was very funny and exactly the reason why so many sportsbooks have so many people hooked. It was a spread bet for like the Sacramento Kings -7 or something, and some guy made a full court heave for them to lose by 6 or to win by 6 or something. It was bad. But anyway, I do enjoy watching bad beats on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt. But outside of that, yeah. Indiana is pretty much 50-50, if not a little bit better than 50-50 to make it. Again, you win one of the, 10 games against decent opponents that you lost to, and you're in. You had 4 or 5 chances to do it, and you didn't do it. So if you do miss the NCAA tournament today, you have nobody to blame but yourself. And I hope that no Indiana fans blame the selection committee if Indiana misses it. Again, per FanDuel, it looks like they're more likely to make it than they are to miss it, but there's always a chance, even depending on what happens today in the final day of conference tournament week. There's an outside chance maybe some chaos happens. I don't know. But if Indiana misses it, it is entirely Indiana's fault and nobody else. And I feel like Indiana should not accept a bid to the college basketball crown because it's stupid and irrelevant and it doesn't matter. And if Indiana does accept a bid to the crown, please don't fly out to Vegas and watch them lose because that's just going to be painful and embarrassing. And again, there's nothing to do in Vegas besides lose your money. And while we're on the topic of Vegas, while I've got a little bit of time left, I'm disappointed that the Big Ten moved football media days out there because I got to cover my first Big Ten football media days in Indianapolis back in July. And there are a lot of student journalists like me here at Indiana and at Northwestern and even at Ohio State, right? who could go to Indianapolis. I live in Indy, so it's easy for me. And there are a lot of other student journalists at IU who live near Indy or who live in Bloomington in the summer. And we were able to go to Indy and experience that, the start of the Curt Cignetti era. But now that the Big Ten has moved it out to Vegas, what are we doing? Like, for student reporters, obviously, most people don't get their news from student reporters, and I get that. But it's a valuable experience for us to be able to go to a setting like that, talk to these athletes, communicate with the SIDs, get this experience. Now that it's in Vegas, the only schools that might be able to do that are the ones on the West Coast, of which there are 4 compared to the 14 that are not. Because I know if I wasn't interning with a baseball team in Tennessee this summer, I'm not flying to Vegas for that. Because student journalists, usually we don't get paid, or if we do get paid, it's very minimal, which is fine. But the experience is great. And I think the Big Ten, among other things, is robbing a ton of student journalists of that experience by moving Big Ten Media Days to the middle of Las Vegas. And it's very concerning that the Big Ten is doing that. I think conference realignment is bad in the long run. We're eventually going to reach a point where it becomes untenable and we go back to regional conferences because, as I like to say, time is a flat circle. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday.